Welcome, everyone. We are going to be starting today with the help of Hashem, of course, a new series within our classes, our lessons on Bnei Noach related laws, the non-Jewish world known as the Bnei Noach. And we're studying the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, the 7 Noachide commandments, which we know are much, much more than 7 in detail and an extent by way of extension and offshoots, etc., etc. I don't think that in any of our previous classes we've actually studied any part of this work called the S'dei Chemed. We have studied a number of years ago. Took us quite a long time to go through a couple of sections in the Encyclopedia Talmudis, the Talmudical Encyclopedia, under the entry of Goy and Ben Noach. The work that we're going to be starting now is likewise an encyclopedia. It is a halakhic encyclopedia, rabbinical encyclopedia of Jewish law. Very, very brief introduction to the author and the style of this magnificent, monumental work. It was written by a Jew of Sephardic origin. His name is Rabbi Chaim Hezekiah Medini. He passed away in the early 1900s, and he was beyond brilliant. And he put together an encyclopedia of practically every Jewish topic in Jewish law, in halakha. And it is officially in alphabetical order by the Hebrew alphabet, but it's much more complicated than that. And it's not always easy to find things there. For a layman or for an average Jew, it could be a big challenge to find what you're looking for. For a scholar, it's really a scholarly work. The encyclopedia, if I may say so, is not written in a user-friendly way. It seems like he wrote it for great rabbis and scholars, and it is extremely thorough, and it's written in a way that he quotes from the whole gamut, from the Mishnah, from the Talmud, going all the way till contemporaries of his, letters that he received from his friends. And he doesn't always explain it at length. It's at times seems cryptic, and it's a bunch of references, and you just need to know what he's talking about, or do a lot of legwork and pull out a lot of books and research what he's telling you. As I said, it's difficult at times to even find the subject matter that you're looking for. It sounds easy if you know the alphabet. Why don't you just look it up? It gets complicated. There are several sections and several parts within several sections and then several chapters. It gets pretty complicated. So much so that after this work was out of print for many years, in the 1940s, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, wanted it very much to be reprinted. And he gave this task to his son-in-law, who later succeeded him and became the 7th Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach. He gave him the job of putting together and arranging it and to make the index for it. And making the index is extremely complicated and exhausting job. I believe that in a private audience, the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach made a comment to a certain Chabad rabbi, to one of his emissaries, that I put in sweat and blood into the S'dei Chemed. So, having said that, the S'dei Chemed in a number of places discusses Bnei Noach by Jewish law. We're going to, at least for now, focus on one particular place. He himself starts off quoting where else it is. So this is all in addition to that. But we're going to start from this point. And I guess the easiest way to tell you where it is by simply telling you the page number. Now, what I personally find so fascinating, especially in this section about the Bnei Noach, is that he takes concepts, details in Jewish law that apply to Jews, and he delves into understanding, do those same rules apply to non-Jews as well? And if so, how do they apply? When do they apply? When don't they apply? And for everything, he brings sources, he brings opinions, he brings contradictions and arguments. But, I mean, of course, he also says his opinion, but it's all very grounded and very source-based. And it just goes from topic to topic to topic within Jewish law that as a rabbi studying Talmud and studying the Jewish code of law, we're familiar with these discussions and these concepts. But to think that, well, how does that apply to a Ben Noach? I find that very fascinating. I mean, I can give a couple of examples from what he shows, but you know, each one of them needs a whole explanation for itself. So I figure the best way to do it is when we get to it, just each one of them, I'll try to explain the background and what it means, and then so forth. Now, in general, the way that we run our classes, I try. My principle is that when we have a text in front of us, I read inside every word of the Hebrew text, and to the best of my ability, I try to translate it and then explain, instead of just giving it over my understanding or my way for the sake of accuracy. So even though presumably most of the Bnei Noach that are here don't yet know the language well enough, surely not on such a level like this work, but nonetheless, I'm telling you where it is, and whatever we're studying, if you have a copy, if you get a copy, you could look inside. Otherwise, I'm reading the original text, the Hebrew, and translating. In this case, first of all, it's a tremendous amount. It's many pages. And secondly, it's just, it would be almost impossible even for those of you that have a great deal of patience and appreciate detail, it just wouldn't be fair. So inevitably, I see myself having to skip certain parts, or at least not fully translating or explaining them. It just, I think that's the only correct and fair way to do it this time. But I will try to stick to the principle that we have here in our classes and read as much as possible and translate inside. Now, this is the S'dei Chemed, which is put out by Lubavitch, volume 8 out of the 10 volumes, volume 8, page 3212, left-hand column. If you want to know technically the way to reference where it is, the real way, so it would be called S'dei Chemed, section called Pa'as Hasadeh, Klolim Ma'areches Hagimel Simen Vav. Otherwise, as I said, page 3212. Now, it continues at least all the way in this very small fine print. Till page 3226. So it's printed in the Rashi form letters. For those that are familiar, it's not even the regular letters that you'll find in a regular. So it's even a bigger challenge. Forget about the fact that it has no vowels, but it's in the Rashi print, and it's very small print. A lot of words. It's a tremendous amount. I mean, I didn't work out how long it'll take us to do it, but this can definitely take us, if we're going to have class once a week, it could take us easily a couple of years, I think. Again, depending on which parts I feel that we just have to skip and just, gloss right over. But if we were to do everything inside, it's a lot. All right. So, without any further ado, let us roll up our sleeves and let us begin. So this is class 1 in the S'dei Chemed. Just to show you what it looks like. All right. Siman Vav. This is the 6th section within this whole broad part. Goy. So that's the first word. This is actually a hard book to get hold of nowadays. If you want to make copies, whatever, we'll have to see how to go about doing that. Goy. Oived kechavim u'mazolois. A non-Jew that's an idolater. Be'inyonim rabim, when it comes to many subjects, nemru b'shasu poiskim, so it is discussed in the Talmud and in the codifiers. Chilukei dinim, differences of rules of law, bein Yisrael loiv de kechavim mazolis, between Jews and non-Jews. Ubanitpas b'marecha zu ois hein rashamti bekama protim upoi ershem b'siyata dishmayim mashin ischadish achrechin. He says, and in a different section of this book, I wrote down a number of such details, and here I am now, with the help of Hashem, going to write things which became known to me, new additional ideas afterwards, after I wrote that section. So we're starting with this part. So you already see that there is another part where he discusses this. But here it's all put together, and it's really, it's a lot. I'm going to have to read faster than I generally like to read in the class. Generally, I aim to read that if someone is actually looking inside and they know somewhat Hebrew, at least they could follow. I think here I just have to go much faster. So this is section 6. But within section 6, he has all these subsections. So in total, this whole thing has 31. Now some of them are very short, some are one-liners, but some of them are several pages long. So there's a total of 31, and we're now starting number 1. Aleph, number 1, A. Le'inyan im yesh begoy oiv kechavu mazolos din asmachto loy kanya. Okay. Each one of these I mentioned is a whole halakhic or terminology or concept in Talmud. And that's why I didn't want to even give any example. I said, as we come to each one, let's explain it. Okay. There is a concept in civil law in Jewish civil law, that is, monetary law. And that is a concept called asmachta, which basically means when a person relies on a certain idea without actually making a technical physical acquisition of something or signing a document. So the question is, if there's such an understanding between two parties, so does that actually make it yours? By a Jew, we say asmachta lo kanya. So let me try to really simplify that. That would mean to say, bottom line, practically speaking, between two Jews. If two Jews make a bet, the one who won the bet did not legally, by Jewish law, acquire that amount of money or whatever they bet on. The reason for that is both parties were not just hoping, but were relying on the fact that they're going to win, which means that whoever loses is not willingly giving it away. Yes, he said he would, and therefore he's a man of his word and he's going to give it away. But that means the one who's acquiring it is not getting it with the true consent and true will of the one giving it. So the bottom line rule is asmachta lo kanya. Relying on something like that is not really a kinyan. It does not really make an acquisition. So the question is, okay, what about a non-Jew? Maybe it's a different rule. Maybe it's the same. Hevesi benitpas b'mareches hein ois b'mareches zu ois hein seif katan yud zayin machlokes hapaiskim bazeh. It's an argument, wouldn't you know, between the Jewish codifiers, the rabbis. There is a dispute. The Kosavti, and then I wrote there, says the S'dei Chemed, Shenire, that it appears, remember this man is a genius, and he knew all of the printed opinions that exist. So he is able to make this authoritative statement, Shenire shadas reiva paiskim, that it appears that the opinion of most of the codifiers, Shagam b'nochri yeshdin asmachta, ayin shom, that by a non-Jew there does apply as well this rule of asmachta. And take a look what I wrote there. Which means to say, so far, that by non-Jews, same thing. If they make a bet, the one who won the bet really did not earn the money or whatever item they bet on. Ata ra'isi, and now I saw sheken kosav hagoy noida b'Yehuda b'madura kama b'chelik choshen mishpat siman lamed daled, that in fact this is what the great genius, the noida b'Yehuda, he was a great codifier. He was a great rabbi in Prague, and he references exactly where in his writing he wrote that as I just said, that there is the concept of asmachta by non-Jews. V'hevi dvarav harav pischei tshuva b'choshen mishpat reish siman kuf zayin b'kaim olon k'das reiva poiskim shagam b'nachri asmachta lekanya. That we go by the opinion of the majority, and therefore, since it's disputed within rabbinic opinions, we go by the majority, and the majority rules, and the majority says that for a non-Jew, asmachta is also like kanya. So now we have something new. We just learned that b'nei noyach, if you want to do it properly, if you want to keep the Torah laws as they apply to you, b'nei noyach, if it was something made a bet or something of that nature, that's not really a way to earn money. No, it's not really yours. It didn't really become yours. Next. That's the end of the subject. That's it. That was the whole class for itself. Now this next one, goes on for many, many pages. So this one we just did now was about 6-7 lines, and this next one is going to go on and on and on. Base. B. Next subject. B'mashe vesi banitpas b'sif cotton memvav im nemera shiurin livnei noyach. New topic. And let me explain. Shiurin, measurements. So in Jewish law, for the Jewish people, measurements are so important. We're so meticulous, so particular when it comes to measurements. Anything, eating, drinking, sizes, whatever it may be, it applies in so many laws that this is the exact amount. We have liquid measurements, solid measurements, spatial measurements. There's just so many measurements. So, for example, when it comes to some forbidden food that a Jew is not allowed to eat, non-kosher food that a Jew can't eat. Technically, in most cases, if he ate less than a certain amount, the amount is called a kizayis. I'm not going to explain that now. We probably explained it a few years ago. Kizayis. If he ate less than that, in most cases, it's still considered, quote unquote, a sin, a transgression. However, he doesn't get punished. Whatever the punishment would be, no punishment. It was less than the amount. And where is that written? In the Torah, in the Chumash, in the 5 books of Moses, in the Bible. Where is that written? It is not. None of the shiurim are written explicitly. All of the shiurim are what we call halakha l'Moshe miSinai. It's part of the oral tradition that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. This is not made up by rabbis. Hashem told Moshe all of these measurements and all of these cases. And the list really goes on and on and on. The size of a sukkah, the hut, the booth in tabernacles. The size of a shofar, that horn that we blow on Rosh Hashanah. The amount of matzah that we eat on the night of Pesach. The amount of meat that you have to eat of a sacrifice. The amount of non-kosher food. The amount of eating on Yom Kippur, etc., etc., etc. All of these things are part of the oral tradition that Hashem told Moshe. Okay, so the question now is, all right, what about a non-Jew? Do these things exist? All of these shiurim. So let's say a non-Jew is not allowed to eat Eiver min hachai. One of the 7 Noachic commandments is you can't eat a limb off of a live animal. That if it was removed from the animal, when the animal was still alive, that food is not kosher for any non-Jew. How about if the non-Jew ate less than a kazayis? Okay? He's sitting right next to a Jew, and the Jew is about to eat some pork, which a Jew is not allowed to eat, of course, and he ate less than a kazayis. All right? Less than a kazayis, not punishable. Whatever the penalty is, doesn't apply. Right next to him is sitting a non-Jew, and he's about to eat a piece of meat that was detached from the animal before the animal was dead. Is there an amount, or even the tiniest sliver? I mean, how does it work? So when it comes to shiurim, do they apply to Bnei Noach or not? Roisi b'sefer chadash, I saw in a new book, the Shakil V'Tari Bazeh, that he has a whole give and take, and he goes back and forth in discussing it. Yes, no, yes, no. V'hik shakushya chamura al hagoyin tzlach b'chidush of the psachim dafayin gimel omid aleph. B'divra maschil shachtoi shloi loichlov ma'tikin v'chulu ein sham karv l'sefer. That this new book, he asks a very severe, a very strong question on what a famous commentary, the great genius known as the Tzlach, wrote in his commentary to Tractate of Pesachim, Shekosav, that he wrote, the Tzlach, She'af Shebli Safek, Yisrael Osrulitin Kochim Leben Noach. Even though, beyond any doubt, no question, a Jew is forbidden from giving sacrificial meat to a Ben Noach to eat. Okay, Bnei Noach cannot eat from a sacrifice. Any sacrifice. It says so explicitly by the Paschal offering, by the Korban Pesach, and it applies to every sacrifice. Again, I'm not going to discuss whether Bnei Noach can bring sacrifices. We've discussed that in the past. that they can, but that's an oila, a burnt offering, which no one eats. But otherwise, if a Jew just brought a sacrifice, and part of the animal is burnt on the altar, part of the animal is eaten by the kohanim, by the priests, and part of it is eaten by the one who brought it, depending on the sacrifice. That meat, that holy meat, which is called kadoshim, of course, a Jew is not allowed to give that to Bnei Noach. Of course not. Hainu, he explains, this means, Sha Yisrael Osir Lehenois. The Jew is not allowed to derive benefit. Besides not allowing a non-Jew to eat it, the Jew cannot derive benefit. But the Ben Noach has no prohibition of eating kachim. We said, it says by the Korban Pesach, that's the only exception. Rak b'Pesach, tichsiv kol b'neicha lo yechal boy, v'lo yiksiv lo yachil v'neichar mimenu. Only the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering, where it says clearly that no foreigner, no outsider of the Jewish people may eat from it. But otherwise, even though the Jew is not allowed to give it to the Ben Noach, but there's no prohibition on the Ben Noach to eat it. Sh'oz as Yisrael mazir shelo yachilu ben neichar, helaksiv ben neichar lo yoichal. See, because the Torah doesn't say, don't feed it. It doesn't say to the Jew, don't feed it to a non-Jew. It says no non-Jew may eat from it. It doesn't say you can't feed it. If the Torah, if the wording would have been, don't feed it to the non-Jew, then you can't give it to him. Okay, that's the Korban Pesach. Im kain, es ha-ben neichar hizir shlo yochal boy. So that means when it comes to the Korban Pesach, there's a special warning for the Ben Neichar, for the non-Jew, from eating the Korban Pesach, but only there. All the other sacrifices, the Jew can't give it to the Ben Noach. But if the Ben Noach eats from it, no prohibition. And then he continues and he says, "V'zeh bli safek tam harambam b'tchi'i mikorban Pesach halacha zayin." And this is beyond any doubt the reason for the Rambam, for Maimonides, in the laws of the Paschal offering, sheposak, that he rules, shamaychil kezayis min ha-Pesach levenechar, that a Jew who feeds the kezayis measurement, or kezayis amount, to a non-Jew, oiver b'lo yisaseh, is transgressing a negative commandment, prohibition. Ve'einoi loike rak mardus. However, the Jew who does that does not get the biblical floggings of 39 lashes, only what's called makas mardus, which means it's rabbinic hits, which is very different. It's done differently. It's with a stick, not with a whip, and it's not 39. It's rabbinic. In other words, there is no penalty of 39 lashes. V'nitchak maran kesef mishnah bazeh. And one of the main commentaries on Maimonides, the Kesef Mishnah, he has difficulty with this, and therefore he tries to explain, and he's having trouble with that ruling of Maimonides. V'li pashut, but to me, it's obvious, it's simple. Shema shekosav Rambam, that which Maimonides writes, sho'iver b'lo yisaseh, that he's transgressing, that if the Jew gave a kezayis to the non-Jew, what's the transgression? The transgression is a general transgression, which we've discussed in the past. Does it apply by non-Jews as well? And that is, it's a verse in the Torah, and it's one of the most general prohibitions. And that is, for a Jew, Lifnei iver, before a blind man, leisitain michshel, you shall not place a stumbling block. You can't cause someone else to stumble. Okay? So a Jew cannot mislead another Jew to stumble, to spiritually stumble, to do anything wrong in anything. Okay, here he's saying, what about between a Jew and a non-Jew? Can a Jew mislead a ben noyach that the ben noyach will transgress? He's saying also not. No. Just like the Jew is not allowed to sell or serve or assist or direct in any way a fellow Jew to get non-kosher food, so too a Jew cannot assist in any way a non-Jew to get Aver min achai, the non-kosher food for the non-Jew. All right? Here, in the Korban Pesach, since the non-Jew is forbidden from eating the Paschal offering, that meat, so if the Jew gives it to him, what is the transgression? Lifnei iver, of causing someone else to do something that they're forbidden from doing. It's the same thing as giving the ben noyach aver min achai, food that he's not allowed to eat, that came off of a limb from a living animal. Le ben noyach. Aval guf ha'azhara, but the actual warning, the actual prohibition when it comes to the Paschal offering, ben neichar lo yoichal, la ben neichar mazir. It's only to the non-Jew. It doesn't say that the Jew can't feed it to the non-Jew. It says the non-Jew can't eat it. Ben neichar hainu eino Yehudi or Yisrael mumar. And when it says over here ben neichar, that is either a non-Jew, any type of a non-Jew, anybody, even if it would be a ger toshav, or a Jew that became a mumar, a meshumad, has completely left Judaism, has converted out of Judaism, who has categorically abandoned the Jewish religion, not just a sinner, not just someone who's a transgressor, but formally became an idolater. So that's called a ben neichar. So those types of people are forbidden from eating the Korban Pesach. So if that's the case, if it's a prohibition on the non-Jew to eat the meat of the Paschal offering, so he asks now, so he said, wait a second. So why don't we count it as one of the 7? Or make it an 8th? There's 7 mitzvahs b'nei noyach. Can't kill, can't commit adultery, can't steal, etc. So why don't we have one of them cannot eat from the Paschal offering? Kol ben neichar lo yoichal boy. Any outsider, any foreigner, any non-Jew may not eat from it. Why isn't it one of them? Hainu mipnei she'eino rak pamachas bashana b'shas haPesach v'zman shePesach nohig ad kan l'shoynoi. So the tzlach says, I'll tell you why. It's because it's only once a year, and it's only when the Passover, when the Paschal offering is in effect, which means we haven't had it in nearly 2,000 years. So since it doesn't apply all the time, and even when it does apply, it's only once a year, so it's a very interesting, it's like a very technical reason, if you will, for why it's not one of the 7. Because all the other ones are universal in time and in space. Don't kill. No one is allowed to kill. Don't steal. Don't commit adultery. Don't eat a limb off of a live animal. The prohibition against blasphemy, idolatry, and set up a court system. Those apply every day, all the time. Every country, every generation, every human being, every ben noyach has to keep those 7. This one, according to the tzlach, it does apply to the non-Jew. It is talking to the non-Jew. It's not talking to the Jew. It's talking to the non-Jew. But it's only once a year, and it only applies when we have the Pesach offering. All right, that is what the tzlach says. Now, we said that there's this new book that the S'dei Chemed saw, and he asks a very strong question on that. So now we're going to see that. V'hiksha b'sefer hanal. And he asks in the above-mentioned book, The imkain, if that's true, if that's the case, if that's how the tzlach explains the Rambam, that the reason why it's a prohibition for the Jew to give this meat to the non-Jew is simply because of lifnei iver, not causing someone else to stumble, but it's really the non-Jew's prohibition, and that's why there's no flogging for it, because there's certain type, there's rules, which type of a prohibition, which type of a negative commandment is the punishment, flogging, which isn't. So lifnei iver, it was one that there isn't such a punishment. If that's true, and if that's really the intention of the Rambam, Maimonides, so why did the Rambam say that feeding the non-Jew, the example the Rambam gives is if a Jew feeds a non-Jew a kezayis of the Paschal offering? Why does he mention kezayis? That's the measurement, that's the volume that a Jew is not allowed to eat of whatever is forbidden for him to eat. The Rambam writes clearly kezayis. He doesn't say a Jew who feeds meat of the Paschal offering to a non-Jew. He says a Jew who feeds a kezayis. Measurements were not given to Bnei Noyach. It's the same penalty, same punishment for them to eat half a kezayis as a kezayis. The whole concept of kezayis does not apply to Bnei Noyach. And since the prohibition is not on the Jew, it's on the non-Jew. If it would be on the Jew, then you say, okay, just like any prohibition, there's a measurement, there's a minimal size. But it's not on the Jew, it's on the non-Jew. So then, kezayis plays no role. So if that's the case, this non-Jew is forbidden from eating how much meat of the Paschal offering? The most minute, tiniest bit. There's no measurement, anything. A morsel of meat. Does meat have morsels? V'hi tmiha rabosi l'shita sagoyin tzlach. And that's a very big question on the tzlach. Who said this? And his whole approach. And now, continues the S'dei Chemed, after bringing down that question of the tzlach, of the sefer against the tzlach, that if that really is truly the Rambam's intention, why did he mention kezayis? Umilvad kushya zu, aside for this question, oid kashe, furthermore, what is difficult, l'divrei hagoyin tzlach, according to the words of the tzlach, Share Arambam mana mitzvah zeh b'minyan mitzvahs shebesefer hayad v'mitzvahs leisas a simen kuf chav ches. Maimonides is one of those that lists the 613 commandments of the Torah to the Jew. God's commandments to the Jew are 613. Maimonides is one of those that lists what they are. 248 positive, 365 negative, and he lists them all. He actually has a whole book. Besides for his Mishnah Torah, the Yad HaChazaka, he has a whole book called Sefer HaMitzvahs, the book of the commandments, and he lists every single mitzvah and explains it briefly. But then in this book of the Yad HaChazaka, in this magni opus of the magnificent Rambam, which we speak about so often, he lists all 613 commandments. And mitzvah number 128. Separate prohibition, separate mitzvah. And here is what the Rambam says. Now we're talking to the Jew. 613 commandments of the Jew. So number 128 of the negative commandments. Not to feed meat of the Paschal offering to a Jew that became an idolater, and he quotes this verse of ours, that no outsider may eat from it. Kloimar, meaning, Yisrael shenilve livnei nechar, a Jew that attached himself to foreigners, voivit kechavim umazolis kemoisam, and he worships stars and constellations as they do, lo yochel boy, may not eat from it. V'im isa delav hazeh hu azhar leveneicha ratzmai. But if you're going to say, like we said, that this prohibition is a prohibition for the non-Jew, it's not a prohibition on the Jew to feed him, it's a prohibition on the non-Jew to eat it. If so, so how could it be listed as one of the 613, which is said to the Jew? We just got through saying that according to the tzlach, it's a mitzvah of the non-Jew. And he had to give an answer why it's not then one of the 7 commandments. But the Rambam seems to say very clearly that it is a commandment on the Jew not to feed the non-Jew this type of meat. So it's a big problem. V'oid. Da'afim noimar. Furthermore, even if we're going to say the shaycha mitzvah zu limanois bichlal taryag mitzvahs, even if somehow you want to say that even though this commandment is for the non-Jew, he can't eat this meat. It's his business. It's his prohibition. But still, somehow you want to tell me that you could count it in the 613. How? I don't know, but let's say you're going to somehow give an explanation. Even so, kashet, still have a problem, still have difficulty. The Rambam in this Sefer HaMitzvahs of his, in his listing of the 613, he should have lichtoi written, shelo yoichal besar ha-pesach Yisrael shenefach la'akum v'chulu. He should say at least that it shouldn't be eaten by a Jew that left the fold, that became an idolater, or by a non-Jew. Instead of saying don't feed, which is pretty clear, he should have said it should not be eaten by the non-Jew. This commandment is not on the feeder. Like we said before, the prohibition on the Jew is only from a very general prohibition of not assisting someone else to do what they're not allowed to do. So let me deviate for a moment or two, just to try to clarify. Within Judaism itself, nothing to do with the Bnei Noach. Certain things are forbidden for the Kohanim, the priests. And they're absolutely permitted for the regular majority of the Jews, the Israeli. Okay. Such as a kohen, which applies today as well. A kohen is forbidden from becoming defiled, coming in contact with a dead body. So he can't just go to the funeral and be in the building with the dead body, etc. With certain exceptions. Or a kohen is forbidden from marrying a divorcee. Whoever he marries, it must be her first marriage. Okay? Those two prohibitions only apply to kohanim. There's nothing at all wrong for a non-kohen Jew to go to a cemetery, go to a funeral, doesn't need to avoid it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with marrying a divorcee. Nothing wrong. You're not a kohen, no problem. Now what about a non-kohen assisting in any which way a kohen in doing one of those two things which the kohen is not allowed to do? I can do it. I'm not a kohen. My fellow here is. So, do I have a problem assisting him in doing what's wrong? Yes. Whether he knows that it's wrong and he doesn't care, and I'm helping someone do something with evil intentions, whether he has no idea, I know, he doesn't. He's ignorant, or he's lacking knowledge, whatever the case is. He does not know that there's a grave right there where he's about to walk. He does not know that that woman that he's about to marry is divorcee. Doesn't matter. I am not allowed to assist him in any way. This could do me a favor and give me a ride to my wedding, and he's marrying a divorcee. I can't. Or more practically, I surely can't be an officiating rabbi there, no question about that. And how about being the caterer? He hires me to cater the wedding that he's marrying a divorcee. Can't do that. I'm partaking, I'm assisting. Can't do that. Okay. That's a very general thing, though. That just means don't help someone do what they're not allowed to do. And we said that applies for Bnei Noach as well. A Jew is not allowed to assist in any way a Ben Noach to transgress his 7 mitzvahs. Okay? And that's the only problem with the Jew feeding the Paschal offering to the non-Jew. He can't eat it. Doesn't say I can't feed it to him. I can't feed it to him the same way that I can't feed him the Aver Min HaChai, the meat which is not fit for him. So, why does the Rambam write it in such a language that you can't feed it to him? Even if he wants to list it in the 613, at least let the Rambam write it that the non-Jew or the Jew that became an idolater can't eat it. Lefi divrei hagoin, according to the words of the Tzlach. V'im kein, and if so, it should have said that he shouldn't eat it, not feed it. Like he does say in the previous mitzvah, mitzvah number 127. What does the Rambam say in his book of mitzvahs? Mitzvah 127, the previous mitzvah. Shelo yoichal ha'arel b'sar pesach shnemer kol arel lo yochal boy. That any uncircumcised person, which includes a Jew, and it doesn't matter why he's uncircumcised, even if it's legit. For example, it's a health issue. In his particular case, the doctor says his life would be threatened if you circumcise him. Classic example given is if he had a number of older brothers that every one of them died because they were circumcised. Then you're not allowed to circumcise the next one. I mean, it depends on the situation. It could be he has to get older and be stronger instead of 8 days old, whatever the case is. But let's say there's a person that doesn't matter why. Legitimate, not legitimate, accidental, intentional, it doesn't matter. Any Jewish male that for whatever which reason was not circumcised, excusable or none, may not eat from the Paschal offering. And there it says that the Arel, the uncircumcised individual, may not eat from the Paschal offering. It doesn't say he can't feed it to him. So the Rambam knows how to write that. So how come in the next one, in 128, he writes that we can't feed it to the Jew that became an idolater or to the non-Jew? But since he writes in 128 that the prohibition is we may not feed it, muchach, this proves, vadai, certainly, that the warning, the prohibition is on the feeder, on the Jew that's giving the meat to the non-Jew. And so too is the wording, is the language of the chinuch. The chinuch is another one of the great commentators that listed all 613 mitzvahs, and in certain cases he disagrees with the Rambam. Basically, of course, they have the same commandments, are the 613. Everybody agrees that there are 613. Question is, how do you count exactly 613? So the Sefer HaChinuch has his way, and he devotes a paragraph or page or pages explaining each one of these mitzvahs. He goes in the order the way they appear in the Torah, starting from Genesis, Bereshis, and he goes all the way through, and he lists 613. That's the Sefer HaChinuch. All right, so what does he say when it comes to this mitzvah of the Paschal offering? Same thing as the Rambam says. Not to feed the meat of the Paschal offering to the Jew that became an idolater. And he quotes the pasuk. Ben Yisrael shnisnachru ma'asav lo aviv shvashamayim. V'chein tirgemunkelus ad kan l'shoynai. And he explains that what does it mean over here that Ben Neichar, a son, a foreign son, that means it's someone who was Jewish who became foreign to his father in heaven, and that is how the Onkelos, the Aramaic translation, explains it as well. Uba'ar el Kosav Sham B'Siman Yud Zayin, but a few mitzvahs later, the Sefer HaChinuch, when it comes to this mitzvah of not feeding it to an uncircumcised person, what does he write? Shelo yoichal ha'arel me'apesach, that the arel, the uncircumcised individual Jew, may not eat from it. Shneimar v'chol arel yoichal boi. V'hu ha'arel shemesu echav machmas mila, and we're talking about somebody whose brothers passed away because they were circumcised, so therefore he's not allowed to be circumcised, he may not eat. So there he puts the prohibition on the arel, on the uncircumcised person. Doesn't say he can't feed it to him, says he can't eat from it. But when it comes to the non-Jew, he says you can't feed it to him. Why? So you see that it's a difference. And it goes without saying, says the Chinuch, that obviously, of course, you can't allow that someone who is a transgressor when it comes to this mitzvah of circumcision, who doesn't have a good excuse, that surely he may not eat from it. Even the person whose brothers passed away and he is not allowed to be circumcised, he still can't eat from it. And surely someone who doesn't have a legitimate excuse for not being circumcised may not eat from it. Hare shediktaknu bilashoinam hatahar. But what comes out from this? That from their pure language, these words of the Rambam and of the Chinuch, they're very exact and very precise in their holy, pure words. What do we see from their words? When it comes to the Arel, the uncircumcised, they say, he shall not eat. And when it comes to the foreigner, the outsider, what does it say? That we shall not feed. Muchach vadai, so it's clearly proven that maichil atzmoi muzhar belav zeh, that it's the feeder who is prohibited. It's not like we said before, like the Tzlach wanted to say that the prohibition is only on the non-Jew, and we don't have the prohibition. The only prohibition we have is this general one of lifnei iver lesitin michshev, of causing someone else to stumble. No, we must say that it is forbidden for the feeder to give it to him. And if so, so therefore, going back to the Rambam now, surely when Maimonides says that the feeder is transgressing, he means that he's transgressing this transgression of feeding him meat of the Korban Pesach, not the general one of causing someone to sin. Fine. So far, now we understand why he says kizayis. Because even though the Bnei Noach have no measurements, and they're not allowed to eat even the most minute amount, but since the prohibition here that we're talking about is the Yisrael, the Jew, feeding them, then it's my prohibition. So just like a Jew can't eat a kizayis of whatever is forbidden for him to eat, so too in feeding the non-Jew, since the prohibition is on the Jew, not on the eater, but on the feeder, therefore makes sense when the Rambam says Kazayas. So we've basically rejected or asked a very strong question on the explanation of the tzlach on the Rambam. This is all in order to get to the idea of are there shiurim, are there measurements for the non-Jew? I think we're going to stop at this point. So we are currently up to page 3213, and it doesn't have the regular numbers. It's only every other page has the Hebrew numbers, which is over here 1607, because it goes by folio. Otherwise, it's the page opposite 3212, and right in the middle of the right-hand column by the words Hein Emes. And we're in the middle of discussing, are there shiurim for b'nei noyach? When a ben noyach is not allowed to, let's say, eat something, do we go with measurements as we do for a Jew, or is that strictly a Jewish concept, and for b'nei noyach there is no measurements, and even the smallest amount would still be transgressing and therefore punishable no matter how much they did? To be continued. So until next time, wishing everybody all the best in studying and keeping and promoting the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noyach, and doing our share in causing the complete and total revelation of Mashiach now. Thank you.